Hey guys, today's story is a little different. I came home a day early from a work trip, my suitcase wheels scraping the pavement, craving the quiet of my own space. Instead, I found my house alive with noise-thumping music, raucous laughter, the clatter of glasses. A banner stretched across my living room, "Family means forever." 69 strangers filled my home, treating it like a public venue. The air reeked of stale beer, cheap perfume, and something sour I couldn't place. My heart dropped, a cold, heavy stone in my chest. My name's Lauren Carter, 38, a freelance interior designer who spent years crafting this house into a sanctuary. Every detail, the vintage brass lamps, the hand-picked abstracts on the walls, the cedar bookshelf I built with my own hands holds a piece of me. Seeing it defiled felt like a theft of my soul. And if you think karma's slow, wait until you hear this. So, before you get pulled in, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually believe that betrayal always comes back around. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and have you ever had someone shatter your trust? Now sit back, let the room go quiet, and let me tell you how it really went down. I stood in my own doorway, the key still pinched between my fingers, my breath caught in my throat. The living room was a chaotic sea of strangers, people sprawled across my velvet sofa, their muddy sneakers grinding into my hardwood floors. A guy in a red baseball cap propped his feet on my grandmother's antique coffee table, the wood creaking under his weight. A woman with glittery hoop earrings cackled, sloshing red wine onto my cream rug, the stains spreading like blood. The banner's bold letters loomed above, mocking me, as if family could excuse this violation. My pulse hammered, but I didn't move. Screaming would have felt good, but it wouldn't answer the question burning in my mind. How did this happen? I eased my phone from my pocket, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. Pretending to check a text, I started recording, capturing the chaos in a small, glowing frame. A couple swayed near my fireplace, their clumsy dance knocking a framed photo of my parents to the floor. A group played cards on my dining table, using my ceramic coasters as chips. In the kitchen, a stranger rifled through my fridge, pulling out a jar of my homemade strawberry jammy mom's recipe, a ritual that kept her memory alive. He smeared it on a cracker, oblivious, and my stomach twisted. I forced myself to breathe, each inhale sharp, each exhale a tether to control. Rage simmered, but I wouldn't let it rule me. I needed to know who was behind this. Then I saw her. Across the room, under the banner's glow, stood my cousin Jenna, 29, her fake smile wide as she held court. A plastic crown perched on her head, glinting under my string lights. She was in her element, gesturing grandly, like she owned every inch of my home. Jenna, who'd always envied my life, my independence, my perfect little world, as she'd sneered during a family fight years ago. We'd been close once, sharing secrets as kids, but her resentment had grown like a weed, fed by her own failures. Last I knew, she was drifting, couch surfing, dodging accountability. Now she was here, orchestrating this invasion. My jaw tightened until it ached. This wasn't just a party, it was a calculated strike. I stepped back onto the porch, the night air cool against my flushed skin. My mind churned. Part of me wanted to storm in, grab that crown, and drag her out in front of her adoring crowd. But that would be too simple, too fleeting. Jenna didn't just want a night of fun, she wanted to wound me, to claim what was mine and twist it into hers. The banner wasn't decor, it was a weapon. Family means forever. The words cut deeper than I'd expected, a reminder of every family tie I'd fought to maintain, every slight I'd forgiven. Jenna had taken that trust and set it ablaze. I could still hear the music, the laughter, but my mind was quiet now, sharp as a blade. I stopped recording, my phone heavy in my hand. My eyes flicked back to the banner, its letters glowing like a challenge. Family was supposed to be a shield, not a siege. Standing there, my suitcase abandoned by the door, I made a silent promise. I'd reclaim my home, and Jenna would learn what forever really meant. The betrayal was a fire in my chest, but it was also a map, guiding me toward something bigger than anger. I turned away, the darkness swallowing me as I walked down the street, my steps steady, my plan already taking shape. This was no longer her mate was mine. The street was a hush, the kind of silence that sharpens your thoughts into knives. I stood a block from my house, cloaked in the shadow of an ancient oak, my suitcase stashed behind a neighbor's prickly hedge. The faint thump of music from my home pulsed like a heartbeat, each note tightening the coil in my chest. Walking away would have been the easy choice. Call the police, let them sweep in, but that felt like giving up, and I wasn't built to bend. I needed to see the full scope of Jenna's betrayal, to unravel it thread by thread. My phone still held the video I'd recorded, a fleeting glimpse of the chaos, but it wasn't enough. I had to know who these people were, how deep this wound cut, and why she'd chosen my house as her stage. My breath slowed, each inhale deliberate, and I moved back toward the noise, a phantom slipping through my own life. I circled the house, keeping low, my sneakers silent on the dew-slick grass. The side gate hung open, unlatched. Another quiet betrayal. I slipped into the backyard, where fairy lights I'd strung for summer dinners cast a warm, mocking glow over the scene. A group of strangers sprawled across my patio furniture, their laughter jagged against the night air. A guy in a leather jacket was carving his initials into my wooden picnic table with a pocket knife, the blade scrape a small violence that echoed in my gut. My fingers twitched, the urge to confront him flaring hot, but I swallowed it down. This wasn't about one defaced tablet, it was about the puppet master pulling the strings. I crouched behind the hydrangeas, their sharp, floral scent anchoring me, and watched. My home was a crime scene, and I was gathering evidence, piece by jagged piece. Through the kitchen window, I saw Jenna again. She was pouring drinks from my liquor cabinet, her plastic crown tilted, her laugh loud and performative, cutting through the din. She moved with a confidence that didn't belong to her, as if she'd slipped into my life like a thief wearing my skin. A woman, mid-20s with a nose ring and a studded choker, handed her a stack of cash. Jenna pocketed it without breaking her smile, her ease practiced, almost predatory. My stomach churned, a sick heat spreading through me. Was she charging people to ransack my home? The thought landed like a slap, but it fit her perfectly. Jenna had always been a hustler, turning charm into profit, consequences be damned. I shifted, my knee brushing the cool, damp dirt, and raised my phone to record again. The footage was unsteady but damning. Jenna, the cash, the crowd. Evidence, but not the why. I crept to the living room window, staying low, the grass wet against my palms. Inside, the party was a feverish blur, a mockery of everything I'd built. A couple tangled on my velvet couch, their hands careless, crushing my hand-stitched throw pillows. Someone had taped neon streamers to my cedar bookshelf, and a book me book, a first edition Jane Austen I'd hunted for years, lay splayed on the floor, its spine cracked like a broken bone. My throat tightened, a pang of loss slicing through the anger. I forced myself to keep watching. A guy in a hoodie snapped selfies under the "Family Means Forever" banner, and I zoomed in on his phone screen. The photo's caption glowed, "Jenna's Forever Bash." My breath caught, sharp and cold. This wasn't a spontaneous party, it was a production, branded and broadcast for all to see. Jenna hadn't just invaded my space, she'd turned it into her empire, my life her stage. That realization shifted something deep inside me. The anger was still there, molten and alive, but now it mingled with a grudging respect for her audacity. Jenna's ambition was twisted, a dark reflection of my own drive, but it was bold. She'd taken my home and spun it into her myth, a one-night kingdom where she ruled. But respect didn't mean forgiveness. I slid back to the patio, my mind cataloging every detail, the faces, the damage, the cash exchange. A woman stumbled outside, giggling, her heels wobbling on the stone path. She dropped a flyer and didn't notice. I waited until she lurched back inside, then darted forward to snatch it. The paper was flimsy, the ink smeared, but the text was unmistakable. Jenna's Forever Bash one night only. $20 entry. Family means forever. My house, my sanctuary, reduced to a ticket stub. The flyer trembled in my hand, not from fear, but from a crystalline clarity. This wasn't a whim, it was a heist, planned and executed with surgical precision. I retreated to the oak tree, the flyer crumpled in my pocket. My mind was a storm, but my body was calm, each movement precise, deliberate. I replayed the night in my head, each image a brick in the foundation I was laying. Jenna thought she'd claimed victory, that she could steal my world and wear it like that ridiculous crown. But she'd misjudged me. I wasn't the cousin she could bully, the one who'd absorb her venom for the sake of family ties. The banner's words, "Family means forever," echoed in my mind, and I almost laughed. Forever wasn't her triumph, it was my vow. She'd remember this night, not as her coronation, but as the moment she lost everything. My heart was steady now, a quiet power blooming in my core, patient and unyielding. I grabbed my suitcase and melted into the dark, my next move already taking shape. Revenge wasn't a scream, it was a whisper, and I was just finding my voice. The night air was sharp, nipping at my skin as I walked away from the oak tree, my suitcase wheels scraping the uneven sidewalk. Each step felt like a betrayal of my instincts, which screamed to storm back, rip down that banner, and drag Jenna out by her plastic crown. But I knew better. Her stunt wasn't just a party, it was a calculated strike, designed to wound and humiliate. Charging in blind would only play into her hands, giving her the chaos she craved. I needed distance, not to flee, but to hone my rage into something precise, unstoppable. My house was still visible, its windows glowing with stolen light, the faint thump of music taunting me. I forced my legs to keep moving, my mind already charting the path ahead. Retreat wasn't surrender, it was the first move in a game I intended to win. I checked into a motel 2 miles away, a rundown place with a flickering neon sign and carpets that smelled of stale smoke. The clerk barely looked up as I paid in cash, my hands steady despite the storm inside. My room was small, the walls stained with time, the bed sagging under a faded quilt. I dropped my suitcase and sat on the edge of the mattress, the springs creaking under my weight. For the first time since I'd walked into that nightmare, I was alone. The silence was heavy, pressing against my ears, and with it came the full weight of what I'd seen. My home, my sanctuary, defiled. Jenna's smile, her crown, the cash-changing hands. The flyer's words, "Family means forever," burned in my mind, a cruel twist of everything I'd once believed about loyalty. I pulled out my phone and replayed the videos, the footage flickering in the dim room. Each frame was a fresh cut, the guy carving my table, the wine stain on my rug, Jenna pocketing money like a queen collecting tribute. My chest tightened, a mix of fury and something deeper grief, maybe, for the trust I'd lost. I'd spent years rebuilding after my mom's death, crafting a life that felt solid, mine. Jenna knew that. She'd been there for the late-night talks, the shared summers, the promises of family. And now she'd taken a sledgehammer to it all. I wanted to hate her, to let that fire consume me, but a small, stubborn part of me ached for the cousin I'd once loved. That conflict clawed at me, threatening to unravel my resolve. I stood and paced the room, the worn carpet muffling my steps. I couldn't afford to linger on sentiment. Jenna had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. I grabbed a notepad from the motel desk, its edges curling, and started writing. Names, faces, details: the guy in the hoodie, the woman with the nose ring, the hashtag Jenna's Forever Bash. I sketched the layout of my house, marking where the damage was worst, where the banner hung. My pen moved fast, the ink smudging under my grip. This wasn't just catharsis, it was strategy. Every detail was a weapon, every observation a step toward reclaiming what was mine. My rage was still there, hot and alive, but I was shaping it, forging it into something cold and deliberate. The motel window overlooked a parking lot, the asphalt glinting under a single streetlight. I stared out, my reflection faint in the glass. Who was I now? The Lauren who'd built a life from scratch, who'd forgiven Jenna's barbs for years. Or someone new, someone willing to fight fire with fire. The question hung there, heavy, but I didn't shy away from it. I'd always been a planner, a designer who saw potential in empty spaces. Now, my life was the empty space, and I'd design my way out of this. The thought was a quiet spark, a moment of power that steadied my hands. I didn't need to scream, or cry. I needed to build. I sat back down and pulled the flyer from my pocket, smoothing it out on the desk. One night only. $20 entry. Jenna's audacity was almost poetic, but it was also her mistake. She'd turned my home into a spectacle, but spectacles leave traces: social media posts, tagged photos, witnesses. I opened my phone and searched the hashtag. Dozens of posts loaded, strangers posing in my living room, their captions gushing about Jenna's epic bash. My jaw tightened, but I kept scrolling, saving screenshots, noting usernames. Each post was a thread I could pull, a way to unravel her kingdom. She thought she was untouchable, but she'd built her throne on glass. The clock on the nightstand read 2:17 a.m. My body ached, but my mind was alive, buzzing with purpose. I leaned back, the headboard creaking, and closed my eyes. For the first time that night, I felt the tide turning. Jenna had started this war, but I'd finish it. Not with fists or shouting, but with the kind of justice that lingers, the kind that reshapes the story she'd wanted forever. I'd give it to her not as a victory, but as a lesson carved in stone. My home wasn't just walls and furniture, it was me, and I'd fight for it with everything I had. The thought was a blade, clean and final. She'd never see me coming. The motel room felt smaller by morning, the air thick with the stale scent of coffee from a chipped pot on the dresser. I hadn't slept much, my mind too busy spinning plans, but I didn't feel tired. Purpose had a way of sharpening you. Jenna's betrayal was a fire in my veins, but I was done letting it burn wild. Today, I'd start building my counterstrike, and I couldn't do it alone. I needed allies, people I could trust to see this through without flinching. My house was still out there, under siege, but I wasn't storming back yet. Every move had to be precise, every step a brick in the foundation of her downfall. I packed my bag, left the key on the counter, and stepped into the grey dawn, my resolve as solid as the pavement under my feet. My first stop was a diner a few blocks away, a place with vinyl booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. I slid into a corner seat, ordered black coffee, and texted two people I knew I could count on: Marcus, my oldest friend and a private investigator with a knack for digging up truths, and Sarah, my neighbor and a lawyer who'd once stared down a corporate giant without blinking. They didn't know the full story yet, but they'd call me no questions, no hesitation. That's what real family did. As I waited, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the Jenna's Forever Bash posts again. The selfies, the captions, the sheer arrogance of it all fueled me. Jenna thought she'd written the story, but I was about to rewrite the ending. Marcus arrived first, his leather jacket creased, his eyes scanning the room like always. He slid into the booth, his voice low. "You look like you're planning a heist, Lauren." I smirked, but didn't deny it. Sarah came next, her blazer crisp, her expression all business. I laid it out, the party, the banner, the cash, the flyer. I showed them the videos, the screenshots, the crumpled paper that turned my home into a ticketed event. Their faces hardened with each detail, Marcus's jaw tight, Sarah's eyes narrowing like she was already drafting a case. I didn't need their pity. I needed their skills, and they knew it. By the time I finished, the table was quiet, the air heavy with shared purpose. We started planning. Marcus suggested tracking the social media posts to identify key player strangers who'd paid to trash my house, anyone close to Jenna who might talk. He'd use his contacts to pull phone records, maybe even trace the cash flow. Sarah focused on the legal angle, trespassing, property damage, potential fraud if Jenna was pocketing entry fees without a permit. "This isn't just personal," she said, tapping the flyer. "She's running an illegal operation on your property." Her words were a spark, igniting a new layer of my anger, not just at Jenna, but at myself for ever trusting her. I'd spent years excusing her jabs, calling it family loyalty. That ended now. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as we mapped out roles. I'd go back to the house later, discreetly, to assess the damage and gather more evidence. Marcus would start digging into Jenna's network, her movements, her weaknesses. Sarah would research local laws and draft a cease and desist, a legal blade to hold at Jenna's throat. But this wasn't just about lawsuits or arrests. I wanted Jenna to feel the weight of her choices, to see her empire crumble under her crown. My allies understood that. Marcus leaned back, his coffee untouched. "She's not as smart as she thinks," he said. "Nobody pulls this off without leaving a trail." Sarah nodded, her pen still moving. I felt a surge of gratitude, but also a pang of isolation. This was my fight, and no one could carry it for me. I left the diner with a plan and a quiet power settling in my chest. The morning was cold, the sky a flat gray, but I felt alive, focused. I drove to a nearby library, a place Jenna would never think to look, and set up in a quiet corner with my laptop. I combed through the hashtag posts again, cross-referencing faces with names, building a list of attendees. One post caught my eye, a woman tagged as at Kayla Vibes, posing with Jenna, both holding drinks in my kitchen. Kayla's profile was public, a goldmine of photos from the party, including one of Jenna counting cash. My pulse quickened. This was a crack in Jenna's armor, and I'd pry it open. The library's silence amplified my thoughts, each one a step toward justice. But doubt crept in, a shadow I couldn't ignore. Was I becoming someone I wouldn't recognize? I'd always been the one to smooth things over, to keep the peace. Now, I was assembling a war council, plotting to dismantle my cousin's life. The conflict gnawed at me, but I pushed it down. Jenna had chosen this path, not me. I thought of my mom's jam, my broken book, the banner's mocking words. Family was supposed to lift you up, not tear you down. I closed my laptop, my hands steady, and whispered to myself, she built this cage. I'm just locking the door. The afternoon sun hung low, casting long shadows as I parked a street away from my house. The plan was in motion, Marcus digging into Jenna's network, Sarah sharpening legal blades, but now it was my turn to act. I wasn't here to beg for my home back. I was here to take it, with a calm that would cut deeper than any scream. My heart thumped, steady and sure, as I slipped on a baseball cap and walked toward the chaos. The music was quieter now, the party thinning, but the air still carried the sour tang of spilled beer and betrayal. Today, Jenna would face me, and she'd learn what happens when you steal from someone who knows how to steal back. I approached the side gate, my steps silent on the grass. The backyard was a mess, empty cups scattered, my picnic table scarred with fresh carvings. The fairy lights dangled, half torn from their hooks. I swallowed the ache and moved to the kitchen window, peering inside. Jenna was there, slouched on a stool, her crown gone, her face flushed with the kind of tired that comes from playing queen too long. A few stragglers lingered, but the crowd was mostly gone. Perfect. I needed her vulnerable, not surrounded by her adoring court. I pulled out my phone, texted Marcus to confirm he was ready with the dirt he'd found, and took a breath. This was it. I slipped through the back door, the hinges creaking faintly. The kitchen smelled of burnt pizza and regret. Jenna didn't notice me at first, too busy scrolling her phone, but when she looked up, her eyes widened, then narrowed. "Lauren," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and defiance. "You're early." I didn't answer, just leaned against the counter, my gaze steady. The silence was my weapon, and I let it stretch until she shifted, uneasy. "What, you gonna call the cops?" she sneered, but her hands fidgeted. I smiled, slow and cold. "I don't need cops, Jenna. I've got something better." I pulled the flyer from my pocket and set it on the counter, its crumpled edges loud in the quiet. Her face paled, just for a second, before she masked it with a laugh. "It's just a party, Lauren. Lighten up." But I was done with her games. I opened my phone and played a video, not the one from last night, but a new one Marcus had sent an hour ago. It showed Kayla, her so-called friend, spilling everything. How Jenna had planned the bash for weeks. How she'd bragged about using my house to show Lauren who's boss. How she'd pocketed over $1,000 in entry fees. Jenna's smirk faded, her eyes darting like a trapped animal's. "You sold my home for $20 a head," I said, my voice low, each word deliberate. "You turned my life into your circus." She opened her mouth, but I cut her off, stepping closer. "Don't. I know about the cash, the hashtag, the damage. I've got names, Jenna. Photos. Proof." I pulled up a screenshot of her counting money, her face clear as day. She froze, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. It wasn't enough to erase the betrayal, but it was a start. I leaned in, my voice barely a whisper. "You thought you could break me. But you're the one who's breaking now." The room felt smaller, the air thick with tension. I could have stopped there, let her squirm, but I wasn't done. Sarah's cease and desist letter was in my bag, a legal hammer ready to drop, but I didn't need it yet. This moment was personal. I walked to the living room, where the "family means forever" banner still hung, its letters faded in the daylight. I yanked it down, the fabric tearing under my grip, and tossed it at Jenna's feet. "Family doesn't do this," I said, my voice steady but laced with a raw edge. "You're not my family. You're just a thief who got caught." Jenna stood, her hands shaking, but she didn't speak. The stragglers in the room watched, silent, sensing the shift. I turned to them, my tone calm but commanding. "Party's over. Get out." They scrambled, grabbing bags, avoiding my eyes. Jenna didn't move, her face a mix of defiance and defeat. I didn't need her to beg or cry, her silence was enough. Marcus had more dirt ready, and Sarah was waiting to file charges if I gave the word. But standing there, in my violated home, I felt a quiet power, a certainty that I'd already won. Jenna's empire was crumbling, and I was the one holding the sledgehammer. I stepped outside, the air cool against my skin, and looked back at the house. It was mine again, even if the scars remained. Jenna's reign was over, and she knew it. The fight wasn't finished, there'd be cleanup, consequences, maybe caught, but for now, I'd struck the first blow, and it landed hard. She'd wanted to rewrite my story, but I was the author now. And some endings are written in stone. The morning after Jenna's defeat, my house was still, but it wasn't the sanctuary it once was. The silence felt raw, like the hush after a storm, clean, but carrying the weight of what had been broken. The family means forever banner was gone, stuffed in a trash bag by the door, but its shadow lingered in the scuffed floors, the cracked picture frame on the mantel, the faint wine stain seeping into my cream rug. Reclaiming my home wasn't just about sweeping away the debris, it was about erasing her mark, rebuilding what she'd tried to steal. My hands were steady as I gripped a broom, but my heart carried a new gravity, not the fire of anger, but a resolve to make this space mine again, no matter the cost. This wasn't just cleaning, it was a ritual, a way to rewrite the story she'd tried to force on me. I began in the living room, the broom's steady rhythm anchoring me. Each sweep pushed back the chaos, the dust of strangers' footsteps swirling in the sunlight. The hardwood gleamed faintly, but the scratches remained, a map of the invasion. I didn't rush. Every motion was deliberate, a quiet act of defiance against the memory of Jenna's crown, her laugh, her empire. In the kitchen, I scrubbed sticky counters, washed empty cans, and carefully cleaned my mom's jam jar, its glass cool against my palms. That jar was more than a recipe, was a tether to my past, to the woman who'd taught me resilience. As I placed it back in the fridge, I felt a pang of loss, not just for the violation, but for the cousin I'd once believed in. The conflict stung, but I let it sit, a reminder that some ties are better cut. By midday, the house was starting to look like itself, but the work was far from done. I sat on the velvet couch, its fabric still holding the faint scent of spilled beer, and traced my fingers over its worn curves. This house was more than walls and furniture, it was me, the life I'd built after years of grief and grit. Jenna had tried to prove I was fragile, that she could take what was mine and make it hers. But she'd misjudged me. I wasn't fragile. I was patient, strategic, forged in quiet fires. That realization was a spark, a moment of power that steadied my breath. I didn't need to crush her to win, I needed to rebuild, to make my world stronger than her betrayal. I called Marcus and Sarah, my voice calm, as I asked them to pause the legal push. I need to focus on the house, I said, and they understood. Sarah's voice was soft but firm. You're taking it back your way. That's enough. I hung up and walked to the backyard, where the picnic table still bore those carved initials, jagged scars in the wood. I could have sanded them out, but that felt like hiding the wound. Instead, I decided to replace it, to design something new: cedar, clean lines, maybe a mosaic inlay of river stones. I sketched ideas on a notepad, the pencil scratch a small song of renewal. Creating had always been my refuge, and now it was my rebellion, a way to stitch my sanctuary back together. As the afternoon waned, I hung new fairy lights in the backyard, their glow softer, warmer than the ones Jenna's crowd had torn down. I stepped inside and tackled the bookshelf, carefully realigning my books, my fingers lingering on the cracked spine of that first edition Austen. It hurt, but it was just a book, not my soul. I lit a candle, cedar and sage filling the air, and stood in the living room, the floors gleaming, the trash gone. The house wasn't perfect, there were repairs to budget for, memories to overwrite, but it was mine again, a reflection of my strength. Jenna's banner had lied. Family wasn't forever, not when it was built on theft. But my home, my resolve, my story, those were unshakable. I thought about Jenna, out there somewhere, her hashtag fading, her crown just a cheap trinket now. Marcus said she'd left town, her social media silent. I didn't need her apologies or her pain. I needed this, the quiet of my own space, the certainty of my own hands. The fight had changed me, carved new edges into my heart, but it hadn't broken me. I'd faced her, not with rage, but with a calm that cut deeper. As the candle flickered, I felt a quiet power, a sense of renewal that wasn't loud or vengeful, but steady, like roots sinking into earth. Some wars don't end with a battle cry, but with a home reclaimed, a life remade, a truth that stands taller than any banner. The weeks that followed were slow, deliberate, like the first light after a long night. I repaired the house piece by piece, fresh paint on the walls, a restored bookshelf, a new rug to hide the stain. Each task was a step toward closure, a way to bury Jenna's betrayal without letting it define me. I didn't hear from her, and I didn't seek her out. Marcus said she'd vanished, her social media a ghost town, her bash a forgotten hashtag. I didn't need her regret. I needed my peace, and I found it in the rhythm of my own hands, rebuilding what she'd tried to break. I'm not the same Lauren I was trusting, quick to forgive, eager to call it family. I'm clearer now, tempered by fire, with a sharper sense of what's worth fighting for. Betrayal doesn't just wound, it carves you into something stronger, if you let it. My home is my mirror, scarred but standing, beautiful in its resilience. I sit at my new picnic table, its mosaic glinting in the sun, and feel a calm that runs deep. This isn't the end of my story, but it's the end of hers in mine. I've grown, not into someone new, but into someone true. The candle burns low, the night soft around me, and I know, I'm whole.